Welcome to Chicago Haunts. The Petersen-Schuseeler murders. One of the most shocking events to take place in the history of Chicago would have to be in October of 1955, when the bodies of three boys were discovered in a crime-free community on the northwest side of Chicago. The entire region lived in fear after this. Even a few years later, the death of the Grimes sisters would affect Chicago also. But at this time, the Schuseeler-Petersen murders had the city shocked. Violence against children was a horror. But let's take it back for a minute. So the story begins on a nice Sunday afternoon in the fall of 1955, when three boys from the northwest side of the city head downtown to catch a flick at the Chicago Loop Theater. The boys made the trip with their parents' permission, because in those days, parents didn't think much of them going places by themselves. The boys had always been dependable in the past. With $4 between them, John and Anton Schuseeler and Lottie Petersen had went on their venture to the movies around 6 p.m. that night. Long after the movie ended, the boys were reported in the lobby of the Garland building. There's no explanation why they were there, except it was Petersen's eye doctor, and it seems unlikely he'd be visiting the doctor on a Sunday evening. Many years later, a Chicago police detective claims that the boys may have been there to meet an older boy by the name of John Wayne Gacy, but it is unknown if Gacy was involved with the boys then. Around 7:45, they were seen entering Monte Cristo bowling alley. The manager of the bowling alley later recalled to the police that a 50-ish looking man was showing abnormal interest in several younger boys, but he wasn't sure if the man made contact with the boys. They left the bowling alley, walked down Montrose to another bowling alley, then thumbed a ride to an intersection. They were out of money now, but not ready to go home. It was only 9:05 in the evening, and their parents began to start to worry. They had reason to believe they would never see their boys alive again. 2 days later, the boys' naked bodies were discovered in a shallow ditch about 100 feet from Des Plaines River. A salesman found the bodies as he stopped to have his lunch. He spotted them and called the police. The coroner said cause of death was asphyxiation by suffocation. The boys had been dead 36 hours when they were discovered. Bobby Petersen had been repeatedly struck and had been strangled with a rope. The killer had used tape to cover the eyes of all three boys. They were tossed from a vehicle. Their clothes were never found. Police officials reported that they had never seen such a crime. The fear of parents all over the city were grief-stricken over the event. Police combed the area, conducting door-to-door searches and neighborhood interrogations. Years passed as there is no statute of limitations for murder. The case officially remained open, but there was little chance that it would be ever solved. Then decades later, the impossible happened. A government informant accused Kenneth Hansen of the murders during an investigation in the 1977 disappearance of Helen Voorhees Brock. In 1955, Hansen, then 22, worked as a stable hand for Silas Jane, a millionaire. Jane himself was wild and reckless and had been suspected of many violent and devious dealings during the rise of power in the horse breeding world. He went to prison for killing his half-brother in 1970. Cook County prosecutors showed jurors how Hansen had lured the boys into his car under false pretenses. The story was he wanted to show the boys some prize horses belonging to Silas Jane. According to the testimony of several men, he was bragging about molesting and killing the boys one by one. When Petersen discovered Hansen sexually abusing the Schuseeler brothers, Hansen had attacked all three and killed them. Neighbors had reported to the police that they had heard screams from the stables on the day the boys disappeared. But the leads were not followed up, despite the stable's proximity to the site where the boys were found. According to a detective who worked on the case, Kenneth Hansen had preyed on hundreds of boys before his 1995 arrest and conviction for the murders. When this crime was discovered by Jane, the horse breeder, Jane burned the stables to get rid of evidence Hansen left behind. Hansen's brother dumped the bodies while Jane filed a bogus insurance claim on the building. This case came to trial in 1955. Breaking 40 years of silence, many of Hansen's other victims came forward. recalling jobs promised to young men for sexual favors, warned them to be signed up or they would end up like the Petersen boy. Even without evidence and eyewitnesses, a Cook County juror convicted Hansen of the murders in 1955. He was sentenced for 200 to 300 years in prison. Bobby Petersen and the Schuseeler brothers could finally rest in peace. Jane was convicted of rape as a teenager, for which he served a year in reformatory, and convicted of killing his brother, and is also suspect in the Grimes sisters' death, as well as the disappearance of Helen Brock. Petersen's stepbrother says, "My mom died not knowing that they caught this guy, but my dad and I promised her, as long as there was a breath in our lungs, we will be there every day that we could to see him put away. Now she can rest, as well as the 3 boys." Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, leave me a comment, and make sure you stay tuned for more Chicago Haunts episodes.